Hello everyone, and welcome to Books in the World. I'm Madeline Mealy-Holt, your host today. I'm the Vice President of the Cape Cod Writers Center, and the Writers Center has been producing Books in the World for over 40 years. We're very proud of our record. The Writers Center also is celebrating its 60th anniversary, which is quite an achievement. The whole effort was started by Marion Voyamir, who is well known as a Cape presence from those years, and she brought the literary community together to meet, discuss, learn from each other, and help publicize their books. Today we have Jana Dillon, who is the Literary Arts Coordinator for the Sandwich Arts Alliance. Welcome, Jana.
Thank you.
Nice to have you. And while I was speaking about the history of the Cape Cod Writers Center, I realized that the Sandwich Arts Alliance, although much newer, is the same kind of thing. Bring together people with similar interests and set goals for promoting the arts, basically. And you're going to tell us more about that.
Sure.
Soon.
Well, it started in 2015, and it was the idea of a little group of people led by Joanne Westerhouse. And she thought it would be wonderful to bring a more vibrant cultural community alive in Sandwich. And she thought, well, she would do the arts, art, like painting and photography, because that's what she did. And she had a group of people who were also writing books at the time, like Christy Lawrence and Dean Coe.
Yes.
And so she brought them in to help plan. And also she thought it'd be wonderful to have actors and performers, singers, composers, musicians also join and have, help the arts become really vibrant in Sandwich. So she brought in Todd Herman, and I think Bob King and Tobin Worrett, and probably Diane Scharf. And so they started bringing plays in, putting on musicals, and that's how they started. And right now we are in a little gallery on 6A, and we are moving to the town hall in September. So we will be in this great, big, beautiful old building from 1834.
Well, let me clarify. Yeah. That's the town hall that was the town hall until Sandwich moved its entire operations down south a few miles. They're down on Quaker Meeting House Road, I think.
Well, now they bought the Santander building, which is on 6A and Tupper Road.
Okay.
And it has this beautiful view out of the marsh. I think they might be able to see a bit of the boardwalk. And so it's a lovely office where they can consolidate all the business of Sandwich.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, it's an interesting subject, the Sandwich Arts Alliance. I know they bring performances. There is a pretty good schedule of things that go on. It's quite the endeavor. Now, you are the Literary Arts Coordinator, and today we're going to talk about the Sandwich Boardwalk, which you were the editor of, and we'll get to that in a minute or two. But what are the other groups that have coordinators?
I was the coordinator until about a couple weeks ago.
Okay.
And now Donna Harrison will be taking over from me. I was coordinator for 2 years. And before me was Christy Lawrence for 2 years.
Okay.
We also have performing, that's Melinda Gallant, and we have Richard Muccini and Tony Donovan as coordinators of painting and photography, the visual arts. And we also have Friends of the Arts, but I'm not sure, I don't think they have a coordinator. Okay. And our president is Kathy Aubin.
And you have classes at the center and various meetings as well.
Yes, lots of meetings.
Yeah.
And it's really fun. It's been really fun being coordinator because you're being able to give what writers want, meetings, networking, classes, speakers, or let them speak and present their books. And it also gives us a bookshop right in the gallery.
That's true.
So we have all these local authors with their books, which are self-published or professionally published.
Right, and many of those people have been guests here on Books in the World as well. Christy Lawrence, for sure. Dean Coe, who has a lot to do with the Boardwalk, and we're going to
Yes.
talk about that in a minute. I noticed that Dr. Reese is active,
Yes.
and he has been on the board. He's been the secretary
Yes.
of the Cape Cod Writer Center for many years. So.
Yeah, wonderful person.
Lovely.
They're all wonderful people.
Well, before we go too far, and I do want to get to the book in a minute, but I let people know that you are an author and
Yes.
quite prolific. The Lucky Leprechaun comes to America. You have several books in this series, and Upsy Downsy, Are You Asleep? I'm sure I've read some of these to my
Yes.
grandchildren at some point, and all these 7 or 8 books are yours. Quite prolific. And then the Sandwich Arts Alliance has also published a number of books.
Yes.
And this one is actually the 3rd, and the prior ones were. This was an interesting project. This was
Yes.
the poetry project. Can you talk
Yes.
about that for a minute?
Yes, Christy Laurence thought that during COVID, we should raise money for the Sandwich Food Bank, also for the Sandwich Arts Alliance, because nobody was coming out. Everybody was inside. So she sold poems. She chose the poets, and then she had people commission a poem for a loved one or a child graduating or in memoriam. And then afterwards she decided, well, let's put them together in a book, and we'll put illustrations in too. And these illustrations came from the literary group, because a lot of them are also artists or photographers. So that was our first book.
That's, yeah. I remember they also did a video of some of the poets read their poems, and the
Yes.
person who had commissioned it explained what they had told the poet
That's right.
and why they wanted to commemorate an event. And the poet wrote a poem.
Yeah.
It was quite an interesting project.
Wonderful.
Well, let's get to the Sandwich Boardwalk, because
Okay.
the project produced this rather beautiful book, and I'm going to ask you to tell more about that in a minute. But let's talk about the history of the Boardwalk. Maybe we should start by saying the Boardwalk, and we're going to tell the history, is in a current situation that's very politically charged. It has been damaged. It needs to be rebuilt. And that's the summary of
Yes.
what's going on now. And you can talk more about that, but why don't you fill us in about the history of it?
Okay. Well, on the beach here, there was a lot of clay. So a brick manufacturer came and he started a factory, but he had to get the bricks over to the mainland, to Jarvisville. So he had this little trestle bridge built, much like the boardwalk. And it was narrow enough for a horse and a wagon, and he'd get his bricks back and forth. And the people of the town got used to getting to the beach that way because it was very quick and fun and easy. So after the brick company went out of business and the sandwich glass factory started, it was still used just for people having fun going to the beach. However, it got really run down. Some of the boards fell out. A man died. He drowned when he fell through the boards. This was around the time of the Civil War. So in 1875, they decided to rebuild it, and they hired a local man named Gus Howland to rebuild it. And he did this fantastic boardwalk, and it looks much like the one we have now. And then there were storms and storms, and in about, I think it was 1990, 1991, Hurricane Bob came, and it just devastated the boardwalk. Then there was an October storm that came and finished off the rest of it. And it was during the recession, so the town was really hesitant to rebuild. So one night, Dean Coe, who was leading kayaking tours and saw how people really enjoyed the boardwalk, enjoyed jumping off the bridge, he decided, well, we can have the people fund it. So he started a fundraising committee, and they decided to sell planks that were engraved to rebuild the boardwalk. And they also had a haircut-a-thon, and they sold T-shirts, and they had parties, and he raised too much money.
That's the first time I've ever heard of that.
No. He had an extra $35,000 at the end, which he used for keeping it up.
Right.
And the other half of the group he started were the reconstruction people, and they took down the old boardwalk, saved what they could, and then started rebuilding it themselves. So they rebuilt the boardwalk, and there was a huge party at the end. They composed the Boardwalk Shuffle, one of the local people, I forget his name right now. So people danced, they made a video of it, it's on YouTube. So that was a wonderful situation. People continued to love the boardwalk. Then more storms came, and they just kept coming, and the boardwalk would get torqued. And so finally it was unusable 2 years ago. So the town had to rebuild it, but to get money, they had to have it handicapped accessible.
Right.
So
right.
they had to go through the different laws. But there were other people who wanted it to stay the same, the boardwalk of their memories. So that was the big argument. However, it's now being built. I went there yesterday.
Being built. Okay.
Yeah, they're taking it down. Most of the part right here has been taken down. The bridge is still there so kids can jump off. But now they're going to start working on it. So the American Disabilities Act boardwalk will be built.
Well, you brought up a few things that I think, well, one of the things about the book that struck me is the emotion of so many people about what this boardwalk has meant to themselves and to their children and to their families. And a few things. One is the boardwalk never had railings.
Yeah.
And it was rebuilt several times without the railings, and that was because people wanted it to stay the same.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And one of the people who contributes to this book talks about how he would always feel that his grandchildren, either he or his grandchildren, were going to fall off.
Yes.
And what would it be like if he had to get down below and help his kids get up?
Yes.
And it's always been in the back of people's minds, but nobody wanted to change that.
Yes,
anyway.
that's true. That was Mark Wickland. And he would think, what if his kids fell in? And they were so lithe and young, and they could just bound right back up, whereas he would feel like he had to save them, but he felt very stiff and out of balance.
Well, and it's all pretty mucky down there, too.
Yeah, very mucky.
I don't think you'd want to fall in, actually.
No.
But I don't think there's any history of people falling in.
Not much. I mean, just that one man that died, which was, pretty a big thing. But yeah, sometimes I see kids have fallen over the edge, but it's no big deal.
Okay.
It's if you walk in that mucky part, you can sink in like quicksand, but you can get yourself out.
Well, was there a person in this book who said she actually sank down to her hips?
Yes, Melinda Gallant had just had an operation. I think it was hip replacement.
Or knee replacements?
Yes,
yeah.
maybe knee, and she was trying to get out of a kayak, I think, and she got stuck in the muck. That's the name of it.
Stuck in
and
the
she
muck,
had to have some young, brawny men pull her out.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that we've talked about, we haven't talked about, is the jumping off. You've mentioned the jumping off. Now, this is a rite of passage that many kids do over and over and over again. And at one point, I think it was Dean Coe who wrote a little book about, it was a...
Oh, this one.
Oh, yeah, it was about, they were going to rebuild the boardwalk, and this little creature that he created, Chesterton, thinks that there's going to be a no jumping situation. So I forget how this goes, but this is a fun book for kids. Chesterton keeps his town jumping, and the whole theme of it is whether or not they're going to rebuild the boardwalk and they're not going to allow the jumping.
Yeah. I think people would jump anyway.
Yeah.
And it's all ages.
Yeah.
I take a lot of photographs, and there are a lot of elderly people leaping off. It just takes a lot of guts.
Well, that's, do you want to read that part about the older person?
Which page?
It's page 103.
Oh, yes, the
And
mother.
It's
Yeah.
called Jumping Off.
Yeah. So I'll just read the part where the second paragraph, or do you want me to read the whole
You
thing?
can summarize it. It was emotionally. It was, if I remember, she got to the point where she had never done it. And
Yes.
she was in her 40s,
Yes.
and she was going to do it. And you can pick it up from
Okay.
there. Yeah.
1, 2, 3. A tingling sensation of bubbles wrap around my body. My feet touch down on the sandy bottom, and I push upward and break the salty surface. The water is cold, but not May cold. It is early October. The Atlantic is holding on to summer's warmth, inviting me to jump one last time. And her very last line is, and when I jump, I am alive and awake, shocked into the moment by the rush of cold water. And that's by Nicole Hendrick Donovan.
Yeah, yeah. There's another one where the woman, or the person who wrote the reminiscences, talks about what the right tide is, whether you want to get swept out,
Yes.
or whether you want to deal with the incoming tide. So there's this whole thing about, I'm sure there's
Yeah.
lots of discussion about that.
Yes, and you
Yeah.
don't want to jump unless it's high tide, or you'd be in big trouble.
Yeah, yeah. Well, what about how you put this book together? Talk about that part.
Well, I sent out the word that we would be writing a book about the Boardwalk, and I asked for writers to send in things. And I asked for the artists to send in photos or artwork, paintings, and I asked for the composers or performers to send in songs. So I did get one song by Bill Black, and it's actually about the canal, but it mentions the boardwalk. And so I got tons of photos and images in, and then the writing started trickling in too. And at the end, I had more pictures than writing, so I asked people to write captions for some of the pictures, so that some of them turned into poems, some of them inadvertently turned into poems. One woman wrote a list of captions, and she's our next coordinator, Donna Harrison, and I read it and I thought, oh, it's a poem. I didn't know it was captions. So I printed it up, and when she saw it, she started laughing, and she tweaked it a bit, but we kept it in, and it was a gorgeous poem.
Do we want to read it? What do you remember? What page?
I don't remember what page it's on,
well,
but
another
yeah.
time. People have to get this book anyway. It's part of a Cape Cod person's library, I think.
Yes.
I actually gave it to my husband. He read the whole thing. He was very moved.
Lovely.
Yeah.
Well,
He was
that's one of
very
the
moved.
things about the people sending me their work. It's almost like they're handing you their memories and their heart.
Right.
So
right.
as an editor, I took everything everyone gave me. I didn't reject anything. And very few pieces needed any major editing, maybe two a little bit, but everything else was just little typos and things like that.
That's what a nice job as an
Yes,
editor.
yes.
I was quite moved. I have always been emotionally attracted to this place, but I never really discussed it with anyone.
Yes.
I said to myself, this is fun. I've taken lots of people there. It's different. It's fun. But I remember you can sit, there are a few benches there, and you can sit at
Yes.
that marsh, and all of a sudden, a half hour has gone by, and you realize you've been alone with your thoughts, and
Yes.
it's a very serene place. I hope people who are listening know where we're talking about. If they haven't been to Sandwich, it's the beach side is on the Cape Cod Bay, quite close to the canal.
Yes.
And the bridge is visible from a lot of places in Sandwich, and the higher
Yes.
places. It connects the land, the town,
Yeah.
to over the marsh to the beach. So
Yes,
it's the best,
it was the old
best I
harbor.
can do.
Yeah, on GPS you just load in Boardwalk Road Sandwich
Yeah.
and you'll find it.
Yeah. One of the historical details that struck me was a comment that the Sandwich Harbor had become too small for the
Yes.
glass factory's business. That must have been quite the enterprise, since
Oh
there's
yes, they had to dredge it, and they had their own railroad tracks coming right up to the glass factory.
Yeah.
And there have been two glass factories. First, Deming Jarvis, so that section of town is called Jarvisville, and it's filled with the little cottage houses that he built for his workers.
Yeah.
So they're really cute little houses, all from
Yes.
1830, 1840.
Yeah, yeah. Let's see. Oh, I know what I wanted to discuss with you, the planks. Talk about the pictures, the
Oh, the
planks and
little
the
dedications.
engravings.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
I'll show people one. Do you have that page number for Mr. Roger?
Oh, I think we have a picture. It's toward the back.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, Dean Coe came up with this idea. He said to fund the books, to print it, what if we sell planks, images of planks for the book? So for $75, people would get a book, plus they would get their image with their dedication on it. So one of them was Monsieur Roger, he called himself, and he had a regular name, but I can't remember it right now. And he wrote, in French, to my very true Madame Lois, with love.
I think I can probably find
Monsieur Roger. So that plank went into the book, and on the day that everyone was coming in to get to see the book for the first time at our book launch, a man came up in front of me and he told me his regular name. I think it's Roger Silva. He came in and he said, I'm Roger Silva, and all of a sudden I realized he was Monsieur Roger, and he was with Lois, Madame Lois, and she didn't know he had written this dedication. So he showed it to her, and she got tears in her eyes, and she just said, thank you so much.
So where are the actual planks now? The
Planks
engravings?
that blew off the boardwalk, the physical planks, have been collected by the town, and people can come and get them. If they paid for a plank, they can come pick them up. And I don't know where they've stored them in town, but I guess a lot of people have come in and picked them up, and there's still a lot of people who haven't yet.
So there's no plan yet for what to do with them at some point?
No.
Okay.
In fact, I met one woman who told me while I was walking on the boardwalk that she had bought a plank for her boyfriend, and then he broke up with her before the plank got put on. So she probably will never pick up her plank. It's a bad memory.
But there is a lovely memory in here about people who have walked this whole length and read while you're reading the planks. Your memory, your imagination goes, and your heart gets very moved by poems, by mentions of grandma, mentions of dad, mom, kids,
even pets.
Pets.
They've dedicated planks to their dogs.
Well, we have just a little bit of time left, and I was wondering if you could talk about yourself and when you give writing classes or
writing talks.
Writing talks where you actually explain to kids how books are written.
Yes, I go into schools, and sometimes I just speak to a grade, sometimes to all the grades, and I will kind of act out how a book is made, because I think kids remember things if they're emotionally involved. So I tell them how I'm trying to mail it and deciding whether it's good enough and all that, and so I act the whole thing out. And I do some drawing to show them how you can improve your writing by adding all the details and adjectives and adverbs and all the description that a child might not think of at first, where they might say, I ran across the room. You can tell them to, change the verb to tiptoe or slunk or whatever, and how they can describe the room or describe themselves or how they're feeling. So I go through this thing that's about 30 minutes long for kindergarten, 40 minutes for older grades, and then they have question and answer.
Kindergarten kids start. And how old are your oldest kids?
Usually in schools it's 5th grade.
Okay.
And I don't speak at middle school because they get embarrassed when it's children's books.
Okay.
You can just see them just squirming.
Okay.
And then we'll talk to high school kids too.
Yeah.
But usually elementary.
And kids are interested in writing. Yeah.
Writing or
That's
illustrating too.
That's good.
Yeah.
Illustrating. Speaking of illustrating, we neglected to mention that in this book are 7 or 8 pages of children's art. Can you talk about that part of this project?
Okay. Yeah. Well, we wanted to include the children of Sandwich too. So I contacted the art teachers, and one art teacher was doing a lesson in hot and cold colors, so she said, well, I'll make the subject be the boardwalk. So we have a whole bunch of first and second graders with pictures of this hot, hot sun over the cold, cold water. And the other art teacher, she let it be up to the kids. She said, if you want to be in this book, do a picture of the boardwalk and I'll submit it. So they sent in all the pictures and we included them in the book. And so I would say there's about 8 pages of children's pictures. Yeah. And the kids were so proud of them and so happy to be published.
Oh, okay.
You know, at that age.
Yeah, yeah.
They were in a real book.
Speaking of the art aspects of this book, I know we have a picture that we are going to show in the film here that we're making about the poster that mimics an 1895 typical, like, Grand Canyon poster, like a tourist poster.
Those 1930s posters.
Posters, yeah.
Well, this was Bill Thayer, and he's a graphic designer. So he did a photograph of a boy jumping off the boardwalk, and that's on the first page of the book.
Yeah.
And he also took that and he used Photoshop to make it into that yellow-orange color.
Yeah, yeah.
And he did a different texture to it. He put an overlay, and then he did some beautiful lettering describing
it looks
Cape
just
Cod.
like the real thing.
Yeah, it's gorgeous.
I'd like to have a copy.
Yes, he does sell copies of it.
He does sell copies,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
Which brings up the subject, and we are at the end of our discussion here, so can you tell people how to get the book and the other things that they might see at the Sandwich Arts Alliance that they can buy?
Well, right now they can go to 6A, 124 6A, where the gallery is, and there's a bookshop in it, and they can get the book there. Okay. And in September, we'll be at the town hall, so they can walk into the town hall and get the book. Nice. And also it's on Amazon.com.
Oh, good. Okay. Yeah. Well, I want to thank you for coming.
Well, thank you.
And you have a website as well, janadillon.com.
Yes.
Your writings are there, and your offer to go to classrooms and things like that. So it has been delightful, and thank you all for watching, and keep writing, keep creating.
We will.
Thank you all very much.